in a moment. Put your hands together. He won his first gold in 1980 Ironman World Championships. He then went on to win 5 more golds. If that wasn't enough, he then went on to bag 3 silver medals, and he did his final Ironman World Championship age 42. So please put your hands together for basically the amazing legends in triathlon. Dave Scott. Dave, take a seat, please.
Oh, boy.
How
Thank
you
you,
doing?
Charlie. Good. I barely made it this evening, as you know, because I was in Nice for the 70.3 World Championships, and then flew in this afternoon. And quite an exciting weekend to watch the best men and women. So
How was it?
Oh, brilliant!
Incredible.
Yeah, just brilliant. Yeah, phenomenal.
I've got so many questions for you, and I'm not supposed to start here.
Oh, you're not? Okay,
no,
yeah,
but I'm
can
going to, because
okay.
I feel like records are tumbling, and I just don't understand and know how quick people are going to get in Ironman now. Do you reckon they can go even quicker?
Well, I mean, the 70.3 races, both men and women they're shockingly fast. The times that they're doing, not necessarily on the swims, but certainly on the bike, can be due somewhat to the technology, but the horsepower is staggering. And then their run times off the bike, as all of you who follow the sport, I'm sure you saw the run splits. 108 by Gustav off the bike, and 118. Chelsea Saguaro had the fastest 117 for the women. So some quick legs. Ironman distance, I'd like to see the men and the women run faster, comparably to what they're doing on the 70.3. They're not quite, how hard? They're not quite showing it in Kona. I want to see some fast legs. I was talking to Alistair yesterday, and I said, his running ability is phenomenal. I mean, during my time, I just looked like a wounded buffalo running, and just dreadful running form.
6-minute miles.
Staggered through it, but Alistair's fast. He should be able to run 2:33:34 off the bike in Kona, and that's what he's. I told him that's doable, and he should believe that.
I bet he was like...
That's a real stinger, Charlie.
He was like, thanks for those words of encouragement, Dave. Let's start with where everything started. So, Gethin, I want to know your first...
I'm going to slide back just a wee bit.
Yeah, we are a bit tight, aren't we?
I'd like to see that conversation with Alistair Brownlee for some stage after the race. You could run that a bit quicker.
So, and then Gethin, where did you start? Did you start running at those paces?
I don't know if this is the same for you, but no, my starting with triathlon was in conjunction with a charity that I set up, basically, and it's become a kind of... I don't know, the triathlon's like this mental obstacle for so many people, and if you can channel it with something good, some inspiration, that's why I started doing them, and then kind of fell in love with it, really. I've done a lot of cross-country running as a kid. I loved the bike, loved getting out on the bike, and probably, like most people, swimming was the one I struggled with, and then managed to do a little bit of campaign with that and got into it. I've got really dodgy shoulders. Funny, we just sat having dinner earlier. This guy here is just looking at me, and I didn't know why he was looking at me funny. I thought, is this weird? Is he straight? Does he fancy me? What's going on? And then I realised he was just looking at my posture.
Yeah, no,
he did actually say
look at his posture. No, I was looking at Charlie more, but
I was doing this.
Your posture is dreadful.
and then he went to Gethin. And I've got a few points, because I was like going, so my arm's like this when I go in the swim. He goes to Gethin. Yeah, you could use a few points on your posture.
He looked at me like I just walked in on a Sunday morning and I'd done something wrong on a Saturday night. That's how he looked at me, based on what's the matter now?
Well, you're
so hang on.
Someone who sits tall is a little more proud about being around, but you're bent over like a limp banana, and you're...
that is Saturday night.
Yeah, no, that's shocking. Yeah, that's a little bit better, but keep your shoulders soft. There you go.
We're going to have some tips for you in a little bit.
A lot of things to work on with that young guy.
So my first triathlon experience was, I was always into running and really loved running. I don't know whether there's any runners in the room that kind of started running and then went into triathlon. I think that's quite common, right? And people kept saying to me, oh, you should get into triathlon, you'd be quite good. But I couldn't actually swim, and I was quite embarrassed and ashamed about it, so I didn't go into triathlon until quite late. And then eventually I did because I was injured, and my very first triathlon, I learned how, it was London Triathlon, and I learned how to clip in the car park of the Excel just an hour before I had to borrow a bike because I couldn't ride a bike. And that's how I started. And then a year later, I did an Ironman. So how about you? Because you must have started somewhere, because we see Dave Scott as this like, whoa, he's such a legend, you were nicknamed the man. Mark Allen said you had this mystique around you, having spent a bit of time with you, I can see why. But you must have started somewhere. Did you learn how to clip in a car park? No, probably not.
We didn't have clip-ins, Charlie, okay? We wore swim togs, that's all we wore. No, we were talking about this. I didn't use a watch, or, heart rate monitors were, actually the original one was invented over here, CIC, which became Polar. But they were, I said to Gethin, they were about 2 kilograms each, so I didn't want to put it on my chest. So the technology was limited. I swam, played water polo in college, but that swimming really was the weakest of my three. I learned how to clip in when those clip-in pedals came around. Back in '80, when I first did the first Ironman, it was old style. For some of you, I don't think anyone's as old as I am in this audience. When you'd step in, it had a little bar on the pedal, and you had a little slit in your cleat that was anchored to your shoe. So you'd put your cleat on this thing kind of like this, and it would grab it, but you had to take these leather straps and really cinch it down with several thousand pounds of force to keep it in there. So generally your feet were numb within about 20 miles. So that's what I used in 1980. And then in 82 or 83, the first clipped pedals came out.
But what was your first triathlon?
Well, before most of you were born, 1976, I did one in San Francisco.
And that was an Olympic distance?
There was no...
It was just a triathlon?
Well, no, it wasn't called triathlon. They didn't have a name for it. They just said, just do this event.
Was that just escaping from Alcatraz?
No, that wasn't quite there yet either, but it was just off. It was inland in Aquatic Cove, which is in San Francisco. And the bike had no order, no people, no aid stations, no bike racks. You just put your bikes on the ground. And it started off with a bike. Around 9 miles, 15K maybe. And then the second leg was a run, and I was telling Gethin that I was having some knee issues, and I didn't think I'd be able to run. I thought I'll jump in the bay afterwards. This was in November in San Francisco, no wetsuits. The water was 12 degrees centigrade, so we were tough back then. I'm not tough anymore, or stupid. And so the end of the bike, I said, "Oh, my knee feels okay. I'm gonna." For some reason, I was just wearing. I didn't have HOKAs. I was wearing some tennies, and I went over to my car and opened up the trunk, and I said, "Oh, those are my running shoes." So I put those on, and it was about 4 miles run, and then the final leg was this freezing plunge in the bay.
So you swam in the end?
At the end, correct.
I did not know that. So
that was 76. So those of you who follow the history, 78 was the first Ironman.
Right.
I did it in 1980.
So what made you think I'm going to do an Ironman? What made you think I could be a professional? Going from that triathlon, which you just explained to us, that wasn't really a triathlon.
Well, it wasn't really professional either because there wasn't any money. So you just said being a professional. That means the implication is that you're going to get money, like a paycheck.
Yeah.
That 1976 race, it's a national holiday in the States. It's our Thanksgiving. Traditionally, you have turkey. I won a frozen turkey. That was my first place award. I won a set of golf clubs once for a race. The first 4 Ironman wins that I had, I got a T-shirt, not like these. These are beautiful. These HOKA One One shirts. These are amazing. You're all wearing the same. It's like you just got out of prison or something. So I won 4 T-shirts, and then the 5th win, which was 1986, one of the locals on the island, along the Lee Drive or the Ironman Run, I think he felt sorry for us, and he put up the money. And so that year in '86, I won $8,000 for winning the race. Same guy put the money up next year. I won in '87. It was $10,000. I said, "This is amazing. I've got a lot of money. I'm rich. I'm now a professional." And there were races.
You're loaded now, though, aren't you?
A little bit, yeah.
And you've got turkeys for life?
Well, let's just say it's more money than you've won in this sport.
He hasn't even done an Ironman.
I only won a frozen turkey.
Oh. Well, I can get you an entry for that race.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so anyway, that was kind of the start. And then in '88, the Ironman Corporation put up money, and there's been prize money ever since.
And I have to throw in, did you mention Escape for Alcatraz?
Yeah.
Is that because you've done it and you want to tell
No,
us about it?
I
Alright.
do you know the Escape from Alcatraz?
Yeah.
I wanted to do it, and I just thought you could just enter online.
Okay.
But you basically can't.
Have you done it?
Some of them-
Right, yeah.
You know, it's you have to prove your time, don't you, throughout
Yeah.
the course of the season. What I loved was the idea of you have to get out of the water within 2.5 hours, because that's when the sharks come back in, right? So that's the reason you've got to prove your time. Otherwise, they have to scoop you out because you're in serious danger of being eaten alive.
So you decided you didn't want to qualify for that one then?
No, I was keen, but I just wasn't fast enough. I'm not fast enough yet.
If you change your posture, you might be.
Yeah, posture, that's my posture.
Yeah,
It's
good.
quite exhausting
Quite
up here, I tell you. Just stood next to you, sat next to you.
Yeah, you have got very. So I think we need to talk about the Iron War, right? Yeah.
Why?
So.
We can pick on some of the other ones.
I watched it back. I watched it so many different times, and I was really lucky enough to be able to broadcast on Kona a few times now. And I remember I watched it back again yesterday, and it still mesmerizes me. I don't know whether it does with anybody else. So should we set the scene a little bit? You can help me out. So it was 1989, okay? You'd won 6 by then. Mark Allen had come second in 5 of those every time.
No.
No?
No, he didn't come in second on, I think only on one of those races.
Right.
He had raced in the Ironman 6 times prior to that '89 race. The year before in '88, I dropped out the night before. I was having some knee issues. Mark had all sorts of mechanical problems, 3 flats. I think he ended up 5th in '88. So throughout that whole year, we had kind of a mental buildup, a physical preparation for the '89 race, and I felt as though Mark was going to hit this one well, and I had better be prepared.
Because he'd won, I think it was 9 world races that year, and then you'd come second in 2 of those, but then you went and did Japan and got that like staggering, 8 hours, 1 minute and 32 seconds. Just to give some perspective on that, in Kona previously, you and other people have been doing it half an hour slower. So I think that, I don't know, it must have blown a lot of people's mind. Did you expect to have that time then?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess you have a certain air of confidence, not arrogance, going into a race on your capability. And I never used a watch, so I just kind of went hard from the get-go. And this was August '89. Just to back up, Charlie, on yours, Mark and I raced in St. Croix earlier in the year, and no excuse, but a subtle excuse. I fell the day before, and I still have a scar on my hip, so I was kind of bad, and I ended up getting 9th. Mark won that race. We both flew to Gold Coast in Australia, and I was leading the race about, I think, 10K into the run, and Mark went by me like I was standing still. Several people have commented on that run and that race on that day, and Mark had an extraordinary run. He averaged about 5:25 per mile for 30K. It was a 120K bike, so it was a long day, 6-hour day, but not quite Ironman distance. So that was way back in early May, and then we didn't meet again until October. I decided early in the year that I was going to race 2 Ironmans a night, so I did Japan Ironman 801, and almost simultaneously in the same weekend, Mark won the first World Championship Olympic distance in Avignon, France.
Because he was doing a lot shorter distance, wasn't he?
Well, he did those sort of medium distance St. Croix, longer one in Gold Coast, and then did Avignon, and that was early August, and then he had to come back and get prepared for Kona.
Okay, so can you talk us through 1989 in Kona? I think we've got some footage as well, in case, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but I think it's so powerful to see this and to actually have Dave on stage with us. So at this point, this is around, you've got maybe about 3.5 miles left till the end, and they literally have been neck and neck the entire time, even on the bike, right?
Yeah, that's correct, Charlie. There was twice on the bike that I thought I was going to break Mark, and that didn't happen. So thinking about the race, if we were together, it's somewhat deceptive to look at this part, but this is the backside of Palani Hill, if any of you have been there. So we're actually going up a grade. And I thought once we get to the top of this hill that even with my unsightly running form, I could beat Mark on the downhill with about 1.5 miles to go. So this was the break. I kind of moved over to the right, as you could just see. Mark started opening up a gap, and I could sense that, for each stride, he just took a peak right there. He was gaining about 6 to 12 inches. And I tried to answer his attack, and I couldn't do it.
Because at this stage as well, to give some perspective, it's hard to tell, but they're running 6-minute miling. I mean, that's ridiculous, I know. And so what was going through your head at this point? Did you know there and then that you'd lost him?
I didn't say it quite that harshly,
No,
Charlie.
you said to me, I said earlier, we're going to play some of this, and he went, don't play the one that I lost, so...
No, I think at this point, when Mark did make that...
Some gap.
Yeah, there's a gap there, Gethin. You just pointed that out as well. I'm glad you didn't blurt that out in the mic.
What you should have done is just run a bit faster.
I did my darndest. So anyway, Mark had 33 seconds or 34 seconds at the top of that hill. I knew it was over then, Charlie. And so coming down the last 1.5 miles, I think Mark's best time to date was around 8:40. I think mine was 8:27 or 4 or something like that. I don't really recall.
Why are they showing the one that you lost?
I don't know. I thought I was the star here of this show.
What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's not Mark Allen up here. So anyway, that...
Just like Spencer, you couldn't make it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So Mark was 8:09, I was 8:10 in that race, and probably propelled ourselves to collectively a fast time for both of us. And before the race went off, there was in the press conference a couple days before, they said, "Dave, what can you do?" And I wasn't gloating. I didn't have a crystal ball. I just said, "Well, I'm consistently at 50 minutes. I'd like to get under 50 minutes on the swim." At that time, the barometer of speed.
By the way,
yeah, there I was. That was 58 seconds behind Mark. So, that's a.
What goes through your head right now when you're watching that back?
It's been 30 years ago, so.
It must be
naughty,
still there.
Naughty shorts, that's what you're thinking.
Well, I wasn't thinking they were naughty. They were.
He's got the hat to match.
Fashion setters at the time, so. No, not naughty.
But seriously though, because it must provoke a bit of about shorts, some emotion around that. And did sat here now, do you know what you were thinking at that time?
Well, this race obviously has been categorized as one of the greatest races in our sport, and time will tell. So it just happened to be a big battle between the two guys at the time, and when I finished that race, and the disappointment sort of set in, certainly within that week after the race, and there were several items in that race where, as all of you being athletes say, I know I can do better. I should have done this. It's hard to forecast at the end or in hindsight say shoulda, coulda, woulda. I could have knocked off 2 minutes and I would have beat Mark. He was very crafty in this one area. I had the inside kind of pole position going through the aid stations. So at the aid stations, the aid personnel is usually small children. They're kind of terrified by the time number 2,000 comes by. They're flipping the bottles over their head and backwards and so on. And we were moving pretty quickly. The first 8 miles on Lee Drive, we averaged 5:48 pace, and then we slowed down the middle part, and we were about 6-minute pace at the end. Mark and I, we never talked about that race for about 12 years, and I was corrected on this, 14 years. We did a big kind of show with the LA Tri Club. There was about 500 people, and Bob Babbitt was hosting the show, and he started asking these questions. Well, we had never given our insight into the race, and at that time, 15 years later, 2004, I was hearing things that I had no idea Mark was talking about, and vice versa. And one of the areas on the run is I always thought I was kind of like a metronome. I was just keeping a constant pace, and Mark said, well, you're like a hairy jackrabbit. I'd speed up and slow down based on the hills or maybe the temperament of how I felt. So I had a lot of variability, but again, I didn't think it was energy cost. Where Mark was crafty is that I had the inside position at the aid station for 3 miles. He made a real definitive and assertive effort to get the inside. So at every aid station from mile 4 all the way to the end, which was just beyond mile 24, where Mark pulled away, I would drop back anywhere between about 6 to 10 meters to make sure I got the aid, and then I would surge back up. And when I looked and sort of analyzed that race, and I actually thought about it briefly at the 10-mile mark, because 10 miles to go, 16 miles. I said to myself, I'm going to have the inside pass now. So just out of courtesy, I thought, well, Mark, you're going to move over. Now I'm going to get this. And he made another definitive movement to be on the inside throughout the entirety of the race. So but it's a race. So maybe I could have said, hey, Mark, move over, or turn to him, made a gesture, my turn, you fall back. And, this happens in Olympic distance races. I mean, I've seen Alistair Brownlee, yelling at some of the guys to move or jump left, right, and so on. And I didn't do that. So, I think of those 21 surges that I had, and that last one to catch Mark almost took me an entire mile. By the time I was up next to his shoulder, I collected myself. You can't really see the top of the hill when Mark made that move, and I just said, okay, when I get to the top, that's when I'm going to take off. And it was maybe 10 seconds after that, and Mark had another plan.
It's so interesting hearing that. I wonder if just those little things are sometimes the difference. So following from that, because that's such a famous race, and it's almost like the one where I think people realise that Ironman could be raced, would you say? I think people, because before it was all about doing it and just getting to the end, but now there was a race. But you stepped away from it for around 5 years' time. Was that a mental thing? Was it confidence after that, or was it a decision where I just need to reframe?
I actually had an ankle injury. It was none of the above.
Nothing so deep then.
No, I mean,
Not for 5 years though.
Yeah, it really was. I kept a combination of two things. My first child was born in August of '89. So when I went Ironman Mark 1 Avignon, I raced back home because my wife at the time was pregnant. She brought Ryan out on the race course at about 2 miles on the run. I knew she was going to come out. It's the sun is pretty searing in Kona. And she came out, and Mark had commented, again 15 years later, that I kind of surged when I saw my son. I'm sure I did. Mm-hmm. And then my second child was born 16 months later. So there was a 5-year period where I was kind of enamored with my kids. I still am, but they're older. And I have a daughter as well. So there was a period where I just said, my foot's not right, I can't be 100%. Mark beat me in this race. When I come back, I want to be ready. And all of a sudden 5 years went by, and it was late 1992, and a good friend of mine, my age, said, Dave, you got to go back and do Hawaii again. I know it's still burning in you. And so I decided late 92 that I would come back when I was 40 in 1994. And so there was really a 5-year period. And
then you went and raced 94, and then you got silver, and then you raced in 96, and that's when I think you came 5th. Can you talk us through that, and was that a point where you said, oh, enough is enough with it, or did you still want to carry on competing? Because at that age, were you 40?
Yeah, 40 and 94. I mean, when I started coming back, I didn't really know at what level I could attain during that sort of build-up. And I ironically started feeling stronger and stronger. And I had moved to Colorado, and I was climbing the mountains, and was at altitude, and I could see my body respond pretty quickly. And every month as I was getting closer to the race, I said, I'm just getting better and better. I wish I had more time. That's kind of how I felt. And not making an excuse to Greg Welch, who won that year in 1994, but I could tell my fitness was there, but when the gun went off, I honestly didn't really know how I'd calibrate my energy output. It wasn't age, it was just really what are these other guys doing? I wasn't worried about them, but I was certainly keenly aware of, hey, I'm in the pro race still, I'm 40, maybe there's a chance I can win this thing. So when the gun went off, I had an okay swim, and I moved up on the bike pretty quickly, and then I went into the lead about 30-something miles, and it wasn't like I was waving the gold medal. I just said, well, here I am again. Play the game. So we got off the bike. Greg was ahead about 21 seconds. We stayed 21 seconds for about 14 miles, and then in what's called the Energy Lab in Kona, 15 miles to 17, that's the bottom of the Energy Lab, and 17 to 19, you're now out of it. I got within 11 seconds on the downhill. I thought that was my forte. And I think Greg knew I was coming. Coming back on the uphill, I just started to crumble, and he put on about 1:25. We ended up 3+ minutes apart. So I was second that year, and I was just like 89. I was disappointed, but at the same moment, I was, it was ecstasy. That was a 5-year hiatus. I'm racing the best guys in the world. Yeah, coming back, it was good.
I like the fact you can do it, because I'm 41 now. Thank you, I know.
You don't look it.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought you'd never say that. Thank you, Charlie.
No, I
just your posture.
51.
Hawaii next year for me, 42. Try and beat 5th. That's a good challenge, isn't it? What do you reckon?
I'd say in the top 5,000. I think that's a reasonable goal.
Get a good coach, maybe, and then
expensive.
No, but genuinely, it is. I know. Genuinely, it does seem like a sport you can do a bit later on in life. Triathlon as well. Do you know what I mean? It's very competitive, isn't it? It's all age groups.
Yeah, it's all age groups. I mean, again, at the World Championships just the last 2 days ago, all ages. I was on the stage handing out the awards with Mark and doing our fluffy thing, and we get the 75 to 79-year-old gents up there. There was one woman, I think 70. There was actually a group of women 70 to 74, and they're remarkable. And every year in Kona, there's been a couple that were 80. There's a Japanese athlete, I think is the oldest athlete that finished the Ironman, and seeing him in the last 200 meters, you think, my gosh, this is remarkable.
I'm very proud of my dad.
I always think that's the most powerful bit of an Ironman, is the very, very end, when you see people coming in at the very last minute of the cut-off. I remember being in Kona, and I was stood right at the swim cut-off, and there was a woman who was in her 70s, and she was like 30 seconds to make it, and people were like yanking her at the swim. But I think that leads us on nicely, because I want to make sure that we get this final next section in, because I think that's why a lot of people are also here, to pick your brains and to hear some tips. And I mean, we just sat early before we came here, and we came up with 5 of your top tips. So we're going to ask for 5 of yours as well, to try and see if you can match ours and discuss them at the same time, because I think a lot of us here have all been there, where, I mean, I said to you that when I did my first Ironman, I came away and I was like, I knew immediately how I could have got time there, and it wasn't anything to do with how fit I was. It was the mistakes that I made with like clothes, with my bike, with nutrition, with going to the toilet about 100 times because I got my nutrition wrong. Please tell me I'm not the only person that's done that. Yeah. I think on my marathon I went to the toilet about 10 times. No joke. When I did.
Well, like Paula Radcliffe toilet, or
no, I had to go, otherwise if I'd done it 10 times in my shorts, that wouldn't have worked, would it?
You said your nutrition was bad.
Yeah, but in that sense, I had to go to the toilet. She didn't go to the toilet, did she?
Well, that's... She did.
And I think like we all know that euphoria when we cross the line, but also that real place that you go in on a real serious note. I think I'd love to get a bit into the psychology, because I feel like Ironman is about psychology half of the time. You have to go to some really deep places to be able to get across the line. So should we start with your 5 first and talk through them? Yeah? Okay.
You're the boss, Charlie.
Okay, so the first one was less calorie, is my writing, sorry. Less calorie, more frequent. So can you talk us through that while I put it on the board?
I think the tendency, and to back up is that if I'm going to be doing an Ironman race or a half Ironman, doesn't really matter, Olympic distance race, it's a long day. Therefore, I'm going to need a lot of calories, and also simultaneously, I need to have a lot of fluid and load up on my electrolytes, and those are all no-no-nos. No, you don't need more calories. No, you don't need more fluid. No, you don't need to stock up on electrolytes, except for the heavy sweaters. Heavy sweaters can have more electrolytes the morning of the race, and I can be specific on that. The tendency is to eat a lot, to drink a lot, and I've heard this people going to an Ironman race, oh, it's a long day, so therefore I got to tank up. We have a lot of stored calories, so even someone who's 70 kilograms has about 2,000 calories of muscle glycogen and 300 or 400 of liver glycogen, 40,000 of free fatty acids if you access them, and then you also break down protein. But if you keep fueling yourself with any kind of glucose, whether it's fluid replacement drink or gels or waffles or the stuff that's out there, your body wants to try to break that down, but it can't absorb it. So the biggest problem is absorption.
Which is why you go to the toilet.
Hence the toilet issues. Yes,
I eat
right.
too much.
Causes GI distress.
But then
That's
I'm
a
always
proper
worried
way.
that I won't have enough energy. Does anybody else have that as well? Yeah, I'm always like, well...
Quit worrying
That's
about
right.
it.
Okay,
You had a
fine.
catastrophe, so it didn't work.
Okay, it didn't work.
What kind of science is that?
No, it's
Charlie,
true.
stop eating.
I think that's the biggest problem, is the toilet on an Ironman. And moving on to that, we're going to keep the theme of drink and food.
Right.
Because this is one I can't believe I even argued with you on this one. Because I was like, well, that's not what I've heard. So this one is, don't eat or drink in T1. I was quite surprised by that. Is anybody else? So can you explain why not to eat or drink in T1? Because everything I've heard is get out of the swim, take something on, quickly.
Same segue from the last comment. You have a lot of stored calories. Even though you burn calories on the swim, you want to get out on the bike, and the workload is totally different. Obviously, the cooling effect that you have in the water it doesn't take much in a couple degrees, and all of a sudden you can be hypothermic or you can be hot. But on the bike, if it's a warm day, your breathing rate has to come up, your sweat rate has to come up, heart rate has to maintain the homeostasis. In other words, it takes a few minutes to get there. If you take in a lot of calories or fluid in T1, you're just exacerbating the potential problem that you have, because the blood wants to go to your stomach to dilute what you've just put in. Again, you've got too many stored calories, so even though you might be out there for an hour 45 in an Ironman swim, get out. I kind of had a steadfast rule. I've changed a lot of the things over time, but at least 15 or 20 minutes before you touch anything on the bike.
Okay, I'm going to take that one on.
Where you start the bike?
God, you...
No, I was just checking.
It might be important. Should we stay with the swim? It's one fin, one paddle. Anybody have a problem with the swim? It's just me then, yeah. Swimming's my worst one by far. So one fin, one paddle.
That's just cheating.
Not on the actual race. This is for training, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So can you talk us through what you do for that,
Yeah,
a training tip?
I think a lot of people, and I was talking to Charlie about her stroke mechanics without seeing them, but she has a real tight trajectory when she puts her hand in. So when her arm comes over the top of the water, whoops, I need a little more slack here. I know, but when her arm comes over the top of the water, it dives in close to her head, and my understanding, because I've seen total immersion, and I can say the two words because I don't think that the quality of their coaching is very good. When you put, no, I'm candid. I'm not here to gloss things over. I'm leaving the country in a couple of days. So when you put your hand in the water, you do get lift if you can take a bigger bite out in front, as opposed to going here where you're actually going to increase the drag when you do that. So I like athletes, depending on their shoulder mobility and their back mobility, to reach out over the top of the water a little bit further before they put their hand in. So you can kind of think of a halfway point when my arm's fully extended, the top of my head. That's my entry hole. You put on a paddle on your hand, with the bigger surface area, and I use these two words a lot, it allows you to linger longer in the front. So when your hand hits and you've got the right entry hole, you can bring that hand out in front on the entry and feel like you're holding water as opposed to spearing the fish on the bottom of the pool. the fin allows a little more height in the back end. So a lot of you that are real tight in your hip flexors and your legs drag, and more men than women, the fin will give you a little bit of lift, so it'll complement that paddle on the front end. So we go opposites, right paddle, left fin, and obviously flip it around. So you might try 825s where you're doing first combination, then flip it to the other side, and you'll find that you're totally asymmetrical. People put on one paddle, and it feels really funny. They put on the fin, and it just feels like, wow, my body is disconnected. I also like to use 2 different paddles. So if you're using whatever manufacturer you like, and you have your paddle on your right hand, and grab your partner's paddle, which is a different manufacturer, different size, put those on. We have a tendency to fight with the paddles, so you want to make sure you have good palm pressure with that paddle.
Yeah.
So 2 fins in a paddle, or one fin and 2 paddles, or 1 fin and 1 paddle.
That leads us nicely to our next one. I want to make sure we can get them all in. Increase mobility in hips, shoulders, and thoracic.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what you're saying. So give us a quick one line on that.
Yeah, I'll do it real quick. Those are the 3 hot spots. So a lot of people end up putting on a pull buoy. They put on paddles with crappy strokes, and it keeps their buoyancy up. But they don't have flexibility or mobility, natural range of motion in their shoulders. So your pecs and your lats and your serratus kind of control all that in your rotator cuff. Your middle of your back, a lot of people are real tight. They run like this. Shoulders are kind of fused. They have no rotation with their upper body on the swim. And then your hips are the 3rd spot where you don't see hip extension. And I commented, and I won't use the names, but there were 4 of the top 10 guys that don't have a hip extension. If you watch Gustav and Alistar, they have great hip extension, so you see their heel come up a little bit higher in the back. Craig Alexander, same thing, ran the car free, had good hip extension. So those 3 areas you have to pay attention to, and a lot of people are real seasonal in doing mobility, stretching, and strength. It should be year-round.
That's a really good one. Mix seated and standing on the bike. Again, I was like, oh, really? God, I'll get you do one line on this one, and then we'll go into that 5.
Stand up, sit down. Don't just stay seated the whole time and load your quads too much. And people have a tendency to come forward, they get lordotic in their low back. Hip flexors get tighter.
Yeah, I think I sit down far too much.
I know that.
So, any from the audience, so we can get Dave to, because I said a few and I think he disagreed with me. So anybody have one? Raise your hand or shout it out. Does anybody have a tip, or do you want me to carry on with Dave? What's yours?
So mine is just like keep it simple, stupid. Mine's keep it simple, stupid.
That's what we use in TV.
Yeah, well, because when you go to Ironman, you see these people with they've got all this stuff hanging on the back of their bike. They've got like 9 energy bars stuck on the top of this.
So put more into you than equipment. That's what I always say.
Think about minimising the stress that you create yourself by having too much stuff. Massive carrier bags of things in T1 when you don't really need that much stuff. If you can use the course nutrition, you don't need to carry 5 bottles on the back of you. I'm exaggerating, but you see people with 2 bottles on the back and 1 bottle between the arms and 1 bottle on the frame, and they're like, it's madness.
And the most expensive bike ever, can I say this, but
the
they're overweight.
benefits.
That's what makes me laugh. It's like, you've got a 10 grand bike, go to the gym. Honestly, I thought that on my Ironman, but he was faster than me. Anyway, move on. So KISS means keep it simple, stupid. Were you ever taught that when you first got in broadcasting?
No, I didn't. I wasn't taught that. No.
That's where you got.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
I think I was guilty of that in my first one, because you read everything, don't you? And then
Yeah.
you turn up with all these bags and didn't use any of it, and it all just gets wet because you don't use it. But it's very true. Sure.
Any more for any more? Honestly, you can say anything. We're in, this confidential room, even though there's cameras. You can say anything about any tips or your experience.
Even though it's being filmed.
Can you shout?
Yeah, it's alright. Keep your cadence quick on the run.
Cadence quick on the run?
Yeah, easier said than done. I mean,
are you basically telling that's what Dave should have done?
You have to get your arms going on the run. A lot of people are real static with their arms, and so they end up you see more often with men, but some of the women have kind of a hooking action, so I'll show you. We see men that they have forward flexion at their hips. This thing is kind of blocking me, so they're bent over like an old man, and their arms stay like a chicken, so they never come forward. So their arms are always kind of going like this, and they're trying to run like this with forward flexion. They end up loading their quads a little bit, so they have really improper body alignment, body posture, and arm action. And if you think of your arms moving a little bit faster, and I'm kind of graphic, but if you think of your thumb going all the way up beyond your xiphoid process. That's the soft spot in your breastbone, and you're going to stick your thumb right in your nose. Then you're going to exaggerate that kind of motion where you're getting that rocking action. If you shorten the angle at your elbow, per your question, that'll get your run speed up. So if you get your arms going out of T2 and your arm action is fast and are not down low at your hips, your legs are going to have to follow that. But I'll just say one thing with the legs. When your legs make contact, I mention this all the time, we're not doing the Ironman shuffle. You don't see people with very good hip extension. So the hip extension and getting a little more natural float with your heel and your back will complement that arm action. So don't think about reaching out with your legs in front. Think about the lift in the back and get the arms going. That'll get your leg speed up.
Great, thank you so much. I've added one, but we do have to finish. Mine is change in T2 into running shorts. Go on very quickly, and then we're going to have to...
Very quick one. When you stay in posh hotels like this, make sure you steal those slippers, you know, the
Yes.
sliders.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
For the end.
No, for the start.
For the start.
That's my favourite one so far, that one.
So
Yes.
you're really comfortable, you just kick them off and you rock as well.
Yes.
That's a really good one. I feel like we could do... And also use a carrier bag to put your wetsuit on. Yes, because it takes me ages to put a wetsuit on. We're going to have to wrap up there because we're all going to go training, and I don't want to cut that short by us chatting, because you will get an opportunity, I'm sure, to chat to Dave while we're going training. So you ready to go training? Yes. A big
Also,
thank
just,
you
you know,
to...
there's a thief in here, so if you want to have a chat with him on the way out, it'd be great. Thank you.
Or if you want a few pairs of slippers, I bet you got loads. Thank you so much, Gethin, for joining us, and a big round of applause for Dave. We are going to head out training.